Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
Once you hit a certain bank balance, you just think, okay, well, I'm on borrowed time here.
Welcome to this episode of the Woodworking Network podcast. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by the Wood Pro Expo. We'll be talking with Corbin Clay about his amazing adventure of building up a nationally recognized furniture brand while using wood nobody wanted, and then selling that company to retire at the ripe old age of 38. Today we'll be focusing on the sales portion of that. But first, I want to talk about what is the life of a business. Once upon a time, a business was something created for a livelihood for life, if it was really successful for future generations. Today, the multi-generational business is much less common, and there are lots of business models that are generally recognized as successful that have very little to do with traditional business goals. It used to be a business was all about creating a product or filling a demand. Typically, the founder of the business had a great idea about how to make something better or deliver a new service or how to change the world with a new invention. Certainly making money was central to the business, but the real focus was on the product or service and the value provided to customers. Today, a lot of businesses are more focused on the money and less interested in what produces the money. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it changes the approach to a business and often takes a business in unexpected directions. This is how a major manufacturer like General Electric gets involved in financial services, or how a company in one field suddenly finds it is a conglomerate of companies in a variety of often related areas. When I was in college, I had a roommate who was a graphic artist. He had a great client for much repeat business. The client was a lawyer who was in the business of creating businesses. He had lots of great ideas and set up business after business, hiring my roommate to do all of the presentation work of logos and brochures and promotional artwork, etc. As soon as each business showed viability, the lawyer sold it, often to the people he hired to get it off the ground. Many entrepreneurs are more excited about starting a business than running it or growing it. Often they don't have the skill set or the temperament to actually do business day in and day out. It's all about scaling to a size where it can become an initial public offering or be sold to someone else. Then the entrepreneur can cash out and look for a new opportunity. Most woodworking business owners I know are not built that way. They maintain a steady focus on their product and services. Their entrepreneurial gene is satisfied with finding new products to make and sell, or better ways to make those products and more profitably sell them. They're generally in it for the long haul. I'm not trying to say one way is better or worse than another, or right or wrong. What's important is that you examine your own strengths and what makes you excited about business. Then shape your business to take advantage of that. If it means you build it to a certain point and sell it, so be it. If it means you groom your kids and your grandkids to take on a tradition of business and craftsmanship, more power to you. The key is to make those choices by intent rather than by accident. Make your business grow in the way you want it to grow. Before we get back to our interview with Corbin Clay, let's pause for a word from our sponsor. Woodworkers tend to be tactile folks. We've got to touch things to decide. We've all been going nuts during the pandemic with the lack of touch outside our shops. But thankfully, there is relief in sight. Coming June 8th through 10 is the next edition of the Wood Pro Expo in Florida at the Palm Beach Convention Center in West Palm Beach. Network face-to-face with your peers, see the latest technology with running machines, and attend conference sessions with industry experts sharing tips and answering your questions in person. Learn more at woodworkingnetwork.com/events woodproexpo. Can't make it to Florida? There's another Wood Pro Expo coming to Pennsylvania in October. Now let's get back to our interview with Corbin Clay, founder of Azure Furniture in Colorado.
What's the difference between creating value in a brand that's connected to a person as opposed to connected to a business and a product directly?
So I operate under the assumption that no one cares what I'm up to throughout the day. I'm not very active on social media. And it just felt uncomfortable for two reasons. One, I've just never been comfortable with, say naming the business after myself, Corbin Clay Woodworking, something like that. It felt arrogant and I was uncomfortable with it. I know that there are a lot of businesses out there. For example, one that I admire very much, William O's Cabinetry. I mean, that's the man's name. You know what I mean? I'm sure There are dozens of others, right? But, from very early on, and the reason I named it Corbin Woodworking was kind of by accident. I did a little side project for a customer that before I had the business, the kitchen and bath shop for whom I was working. There was this little side project, wasn't profitable for them, so they would let me do those, these little onesie twosie jobs. So I built these two bookcases for this guy, and I delivered them, and he said, "Okay, who do I write the check to, or to whom do I write the check?" And I said, Corbin, and I was about to say Corbin Clay, but I thought that sounded unprofessional. So I said, Corbin Woodworking. And he goes, okay. And he writes it out to Corbin Woodworking. And then I take it to the bank the next day to deposit it to my personal checking account. And they said, hey, this isn't a thing. So back then you could register a trade name with the Secretary of State, right there from the banker's office. I don't think they do that anymore, but yeah, he said that. The business banker was like, well, we can start your company if you'd like. And I thought, I hadn't planned on starting a business today, but it'd been in the back of my mind. So sure. So that's why Corbin Woodworking first started.
Well, that's a little bit of an advantage for you long term, though, because I did an interview some years ago with very famous designer craftsman Wendell Castle. And, everything in his business was connected to him. And late in his life, he realized that he had actually created no value in his business. And all of the value he had created was in his name. And he actually created another business called Icon that was intended to be something that he could build and sell and have value on its own.
Yeah.
So now, when you decided to retire at the ripe old age of 38, what made you decide that it was time to get out of that furniture business?
So the company had grown much bigger than I had ever planned. At one point we had 2 full-time production shifts. One of the best days that I had at that business was maybe 6:30 or so in the evening. And I remember having a chat with my second shift production manager. Like, you guys okay? Everything good here? I had a very hard time delegating things, as I'm sure every person listening to this is nodding their head in agreement. But I remember driving away with full production continuing. I'm driving away to go home, and there's a team of 6 people back at the shop working. I remember one day we were pitching and catching on sander first shift. The machine didn't turn off from first shift to second shift. We just moved guys. You just swapped guys in. But anyway, it just got way bigger than I'd ever planned on, and way bigger than I felt comfortable managing. I'm not a good manager. I feel like I'm a good leader, but I'm a terrible manager. I micromanage. I'm very impatient. And it was having a negative effect on the business. We weren't we were having a hard time keeping employees on staff. And it was tough too, because, we put a year into training these people, and then, I'd kind of run them out the door. And my production manager and I had a heart to heart one time, and he kind of leveled me and just said, yeah, dude, no one wants to work here, and it's because of you. And I was dumbfounded, because I genuinely didn't know how to do it any better, how to run, or how to be a better boss. I thought I was doing a great job, but you have to acknowledge what they're saying. If that's how they feel, that's how they feel. So I thought, okay, it's time to bring in a proper COO, to hand over the reins, to run the business full, and, encourage everybody. And I'll be the visionary. We'll bring in an integrator. If you've read Traction, the EOS. So I met with a former COO that at a company I'd worked with. And I said, so what's the scoop on COO? And run me down, talk to me like I'm an 8-year-old, explain this to me. And she did, and she was great. And it was about an 18 to 24 month process to recruit, onboard, train, and then fully hand over the reins to that COO. And I just thought, man, I don't know if I've got this in me. I was going home frustrated every day. We were making a ton of money, which was nice, but I never thought I'd have any money to begin with. So once you hit a certain bank balance, you just think, okay, well, I'm on borrowed time here, because this is $100,000 more than I ever thought I'd have anyway, even if it were $105,000, right?
Right.
So yeah, it just, it was time for a proper executive to come in and scale the business from where I left off to bigger and better days. And secondly, I felt that I'd achieved my original goal. Let's see how many of these trees we can reclaim. Let's see how many jobs we can create. And, after 10 years and 6 really focused years, we'd done that. We'd reclaimed over 1 million lineal feet of that material. We created dozens of jobs, lots of Christmas bonuses. And, and I was really losing motivation. We'd launched a second contract furniture program. And I remember Tuesday mornings we'd have value meetings. And 5 years prior, I could say, hey, this is why we have to put our heads down and grind, because we're working toward this mission of reclaiming all these pine trees and hopefully mitigating forest fires and, helping people participate in a solution. When we switched over to the contract furniture that wasn't tied to beetle kill either, we were using 10 other kinds of woods. I just saying, we're helping offices get the conference table they want. It wasn't nearly as inspirational. And they saw right there, back to the authenticity thing, but I did that knowing that we need to have a good scalable product program that someone else could buy and scale themselves. Did I answer your question? Brevity is not a strength of mine.
That was good. But when you moved though from bringing in a chief operating officer to actually finding a buyer for the business, what was involved in that process?
So I reached out to a business broker, and a few years earlier, I almost sold the company to the production manager. In fact, he'd had a competitor of ours years prior, and he was in a partnership, and that partnership dissolved. So he then applied for our production manager spot. And, I asked him, I said, would you be interested in, if I told you Azora were for sale, is that something you might be interested in? He said immediately, yes, very interested. Well, I did a valuation. I think it was with the Chamber of Commerce. It wasn't a proper business broker. It was, some maybe it was a university or something. It was years ago, I forget. But, we went through the trailing 36, P&L, P's and L, however you make P&L plural. And they basically said, even though we were doing, 70, 80 grand to the bottom line for those 3 years, they said, I see here that you're only paying yourself about 12 grand. And I said, well, yeah, what I do is I just, kind of pay myself the bare minimum weekly or biweekly. And then if there's any money left, I'll just take a draw. And he said, okay, but you didn't really take much of a draw. So he said, what would it cost for you to replace yourself in the business? What would you have to pay somebody? I said, probably 80, upwards of 100. And he said, okay, your business is worth nothing.
Right.
Because
the profit was the same as what it would
right.
take to replace you. Yes.
That would have to go into your overhead. And that was a very rude awakening, but a very important awakening. It's like, okay, if I'm going to sell this business, which at the time sounded very attractive, not because I could then go to a beach and sip Mai Tais for the rest of my life, but more so that liquidation and closing wasn't the only option, which at the time was the only option I'd had. I'm going to run this until I die. Or
right. Well, that's a real common situation that a lot of shops do, that the guy gets old and tired and then he decides, well, I'll just call the auction house.
Right. So I'd actually hired a business broker, just through, a couple different Google searches. I met with two absolute clowns. They were convinced we could sell the business for a 20x multiple and this and that. And I just thought, I don't think Uber was trading for a 20x multiple at the time. Like, I don't think this is very reasonable. So have your antenna up, right? So I hired several different business brokers, unofficial hires. And then finally the third one shot me straight. At the time, it was about 14, maybe 16 months before we listed the business. And he just kind of taught me, here's what makes a business valuable, specifically in your category, in your, I guess, kind of revenue bracket, right? Like once you break that, it kind of seems up to 10 million. If you're doing 1 to 10 million top line, this is what's important. Once you break that 10 million, now you get into like discounted cash flow, valuations and EBITDA and all this other stuff. But he said, for where you're at, we were doing about 1.8 top line. He said, here's what's important: discretionary income. So here's your bottom line. And then for this specific valuation, we have what's called add backs, to where basically we want that discretionary income number to be as absolutely high as possible. So he told me specifically, if it's not absolutely necessary, don't buy it. We can add it back in, right? We can say, well, we bought a $15,000 straight line rip, but I chose to buy that. We didn't have to, so therefore it's considered an add back, discretionary. He's like, but there's a lot of subjectivity to valuations. And, we don't want to give another buyer any negotiating leverage if we don't have to, right? So that was one big piece of advice. He said, we want that bottom line to be as big as possible. So from the first meeting I'd had to where the guy said, excuse me, your company's worth nothing, even though we're making $70K a year free and clear, company's not worth anything because this was incorrect in your accounting. Thought, okay, that's good. And then we paid for an external audit. I don't know much about finance, and I'm not very strong with numbers, unfortunately. So I was always scared that there was some glaring mistake in our books just lurking for someone that does know what he or she's talking about to find. So we actually paid for a external audit where we had another CPA firm come in and audit 36 months worth of our books just to say, no, you're good. There's a little subjectivity here in how they considered this, but otherwise everything's looking good. And it's like, okay, cool. If two people are saying these books are airtight, which is very important, you absolutely have to have airtight numbers if you're going to sell your company. But yeah, we just started structuring the business, to make it more profitable, make it as independent from me as possible, which, I'd already started to do years prior from a few books I'd read. And then I just really tried to create a very clear model and plan for the future of the company, saying, I'm pretty good at my job, but this will all continue to progress and work successfully even without me here. Right. You replaced me with a proper sales director, because I was doing outside sales for that contract program, my last probably 12 months with the company. And I said, any competent salesperson could come in and do exactly what I'm doing. The shop, I had left the production, years prior. I'd left the inside sales to a team years prior. So I thought, well, I'm just a salesman at this point, a salesman of the product, not of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So you potential buyer could do it yourself, or if you want to bring in a sales director, you can very easily scale this thing and off you go.
So what's your advice for woodworkers who are still trying to build their business and more importantly, build value in the business?
It depends on what their goal is. My first piece of advice would be sit down and really think through it, with your partner, to say, what do we want out of this? Some people just want the autonomy of running their own company. Maybe they'll have a helper. They like seeing their name on the side of the van instead of someone else's name. And if that's fine, great. They don't want to scale. They don't want a team. If they can make, 80 grand, 100 grand a year, that's totally fine. That's great. But if that's your goal, then own it. Right. My goal was not that. I wanted total world domination. So the goal was, personally, my goal for the business was that I got to choose what I did every day. If I wanted to go back and make some sawdust, I could do that. If I wanted to put on a suit and go out and sell, I could do that. If I wanted to go play hockey, I could do that. So that was my goal. And trying to replace yourself with systems, which is a very sore subject in woodworking as well. We romanticize it very much. And that's why I like Woodworking Network and media outlets like that, because, bringing in a CNC doesn't mean you no longer love woodworking. It means you put your business owner hat on as opposed to your craftsman hat, and realize if there's a faster, more efficient, and thus more profitable way of doing it, then I'm just a fool if I don't.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, a few years ago, you were recognized as one of the Woodworking Network 40 Under 40 honorees. Today, you're certainly not of an age where most people end their working life. What's your next act?
So we're building several houses in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, just south of Breckenridge, that we'll use as rentals, and that's what I'm physically building them. So the first one's done. The second one we just got dried in. So for the next 9 months or so, I'll be building those houses, and then we'll put them up on Airbnb or VRBO. I have absolutely no interest to invest in the stock market even before all this GameStop foolishment, and now all of a sudden,
and you're not going to try and do some other manufacturing business.
I may very well. Basically, you should only ever start a business if you're able to fix a problem for somebody. And the bigger the problem, then the more successful you'll be. So I have a hard time. With people starting a business simply because they just want to be a business owner. It's like, this is really hard.
I think you're really right on there with the idea of solving a problem. I have a friend who describes some entrepreneurs and business people as just chronically unemployable. They can't work for anybody but themselves. And the idea of creating something that has value in itself and something that solves people's problems are key issues that help you think about your business as a business. And I think a lot of our listeners would do well to take those to heart.
Yeah, it's so hard, to run a business, and it's complicated. There's a lot of education that you need to do. There's a lot of like I said, hardship and disappointment throughout the process. So if there's a problem that you're trying to tackle and solve on behalf of somebody else, it makes it all, a lot easier to stomach, So yeah, I just keep my eyes out. Maybe there's a couple big problems within the industry that have frustrated me ever since my lowly remodeling days that I don't know if they're fixable, but, it'd probably be a tech play and now I have to find a technical co-founder or a CTO or write a six-figure check to a dev shop, which none of those three are very exciting. So.
Well, I can see that the gears are always turning and you're always looking out for an opportunity. So I wish you luck in whatever it is that you do, Corbin, and appreciate you coming on the Woodworking Network podcast today.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
That's it for today. As a bit of a footnote, since this podcast was recorded, Corbin Clay has launched a new business to help woodworking shops and contractors get paid on time. It's called Integrity, and you can learn more at paywithintegrity.com. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Wood Pro Expo. If you have a comment or topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.